Welcome to our channel, Gray Matters. We are two neurodivergent ladies who fixate and need to share, and we've created this channel to do just that. One thing that the death of Mica Miller has brought to light is how often the deaths of women are ruled suicides without an appropriate investigation. We see over and over that the word of a man involved in a case of a death of an intimate partner is taken over what the crime scene suggests. We do often see that in these cases, the investigators do trust the crime scene over the intimate partner, yet the perpetrator attempts to spin a yarn about his partner's mental health, painting her as crazy. We want to talk about two such cases, as well as one case that is an outlier, but has the hallmarks of a woman being controlled by her husband. On February 4th, 2021, 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore was discovered dead in her Canton, Massachusetts apartment. At the time, her death was ruled a suicide by asphyxia. Sandra was pregnant at the time of her death. Sandra was raised in Stoughton, Massachusetts by her mother and grandmother, both of whom passed away when Sandra was a teenager. At age 12, Sandra joined a program called the Stoughton Police Explorers, where she met officer and instructor Matthew Farwell. He was 27 years old when he allegedly began grooming Sandra at age 15. Sandra reportedly, quote, deeply respected law enforcement, and Matthew took advantage of this. Early text messages discovered between Sandra and Matthew included discussions about Matthew being Sandra's first sexual partner after he began tutoring her when she was a freshman in high school. According to an affidavit, Matthew would, quote, engage in forceful oral, vaginal, and anal sex acts to punish Sandra for bad grades or having sex with other people. Matthew got married in 2013 and 1 month later committed statutory rape against Sandra. He left work more than 24 times to meet Sandra. In late 2020, Sandra learned that she was pregnant, simulated sexual assaults after confiding in a friend that she had been in a sexual relationship with him for a decade. According to text exchanges, Sandra told Matthew that if he impregnated her, she wouldn't tell his wife about their relationship. Matthew had 2 children, and his wife was pregnant with the couple's 3rd child at this time. Soon, Matthew attempted to back out of this agreement, but Sandra was committed to having his baby. She wanted him to sign the birth certificate and be with her in the delivery room, in exchange for her not talking badly about his wife and children. On December 28, 2020, Sandra told Matthew that she was 3.5 weeks pregnant, with a celebratory poster she made for him. Matthew was very upset, leaving Sandra scared he was going to hit her. A few days later, Sandra told a friend that Matthew had just told her he, quote, wish she just would die and he wants nothing to do with the baby, and got violent with her. After this, a friend called the Stoughton Police Department to report the relationship, sending Matthew into a rage against the employee who took the report. He sent Sandra a series of angry texts. On January 24, 2021, Sandra told a friend that Matthew had looked at her closet and her bathroom in a strange way, but his demeanor had changed. He brought her ginger ale and crackers and asked for a key to her apartment and the code to her building. At the end of January, Sandra spent her time preparing for the baby. She had name ideas, was ordering items online, and was booking OBGYN appointments. On February 1st, 2021, just after 9 p.m., Matthew texted Sandra to see if he could come over. He is seen on video arriving at 9:15 p.m. and leaving at 9:45 p.m. The next day, his wife gave birth. On February 4th, 2021, a work colleague contacted the police department after Sandra missed multiple days of work. Police discovered Sandra's body, clothed in the same outfit she was seen on surveillance video on February 1st. They found her body, quote, seated on the floor in a reclined position with a duffel bag strap tied around her neck, with the strap being found, quote, connected to a closet doorknob, the same closet Farwell inspected about a week earlier. Also seen on surveillance video from that day is Matthew and Sandra entering her apartment, and Matthew leaving 30 minutes later with his hood pulled up and a medical mask covering his face. Matthew initially told investigators that he and Sandra argued on the night of her death, but she was alive when he left. Sandra's family discovered that she was in the middle of doing laundry when she died, and found new baby items and the poster Sandra had made for Matthew announcing the pregnancy in her apartment. On February 6, 2021, Massachusetts State Police interviewed Matthew. He said the relationship began in 2020. They only had sex 2 or 3 times, and he could not have possibly been the father of the baby. He also told police that Sandra had been involuntarily hospitalized many times for mental health issues. Sandra had in fact been involuntarily hospitalized in May 2020, but it was after a fight with a family member, and she was deemed not a risk for self-harm. On February 11, 2021, Matthew's twin brother William admitted to having been in a sexual relationship with Sandra as recently as 2020. He admitted that Sandra told him that Matthew was the father of her baby. In spring 2021, Matthew Farwell was placed on administrative leave. He met with a coworker at a bar where he expressed anger and being investigated, and did not show any, quote, sadness, grief, or remorse in relation to Sandra's death. In early May 2021, Sandra's death was ruled a suicide. Early April 2022, Matthew resigned from the police department, and William was placed on administrative leave, ultimately resigning that August. On September 22, 2022, Stoughton Police Chief Donna McNamara shared the details of an internal affairs investigation.
With her. Here's Chief Donna McNamara in 2022.
The admiration led her to form relationships with men who were willing to take advantage of her.
Birchmore's estate has a pending wrongful death lawsuit against the 3 officers, William Farwell, his brother Matthew, and the former Deputy Chief Robert Devine, for engaging in a, quote, near decade-long scheme of grooming and repeated assaults. The 3 officers have denied the allegations.
It found that the Farwell brothers and their former supervisor, Robert Devine, violated department rules through their inappropriate conduct with Sandra. On December 29, 2022, a wrongful death lawsuit was filed on behalf of Sandra's estate, naming Matthew Farwell, his twin brother William Farwell, and their supervisor and mentor, Robert Devine, who ran the Explorer program, as defendants. It was with this lawsuit did the scope of Matthew's control become clear. Matthew would track Sandra's whereabouts via her phone and would question her when her phone was turned off. The lawsuit lays out a decades-long pattern of, quote, grooming and repeated sexual assaults from a young age. They also accuse Stoughton and its police department of negligence in hiring Matthew, William, and Robert. Eventually, Sandra's cause of death was changed, as investigators determined that Matthew had strangled Sandra and staged her death as a suicide to hide their relationship and her pregnancy. Matthew Farwell was federally indicted on murder charges in 2024. Prosecutors allege that the night in January that he checked Sandra's closet and bathroom was Matthew scouting ways to stage her death, and his timing was based on a snowstorm that hit the city, making it less likely for her body to be found in a timely manner. From Lakedra Chavis's article, How a Massachusetts Cop Allegedly Groomed, Controlled, and Killed Sandra Birchmore, quote, prosecutors paint Farwell as a controlling predator who was fixated on playing out violent rape fantasies with Birchmore ever since she was a young teenager in the Explorer program. An investigation of the Explorer program and others like it around the country was launched by the Marshall Project. They found a history of sexual abuse and misconduct allegations, which resulted in either no criminal prosecution or sentences that amounted to simple slaps on the wrist. Since the 1970s, there have been nearly 200 allegations of abuse and misconduct against officers in the Explorer program.
New reporting about a police youth program linked to nearly 200 allegations of sex abuse and misconduct across the country. An investigation by the Marshall Project in partnership with NBC News finds that law enforcement personnel are accused of grooming, sexually abusing, or engaging in some type of inappropriate behavior with teens and young adults enrolled in an Explorer program, as it's called. The majority of those affected are teenage girls, some as young as 13.
Matthew has pleaded not guilty. On October 7th, 2024, 38-year-old Christa Bauer Gilley from Houston, Texas, was found dead in the home she shared with her husband, 38-year-old Lee Gilley, and the couple's 2 children. At the time of her death, Christa was 9 weeks pregnant with the couple's 3rd child. The couple married in Charleston, South Carolina in 2017, nearly a decade after meeting at Clemson University. The couple reconnected 8 years after leaving college, and Lee proposed 11 months later. Lee worked as a self-employed software consultant. Christa had her doctorate in physical therapy and worked in a hospital with cardiovascular and pulmonary patients. She was slated to speak at the American Physical Therapy Association's conference this coming February. Houston police responded to a 911 call reporting a suicide at the Gilley home. Lee had called 911 after finding Christa unresponsive. When police arrived, he was performing CPR. Christa was pronounced dead at the hospital. Lee told police that the couple had been arguing that day about the purchase of a new car, and he believed that Christa had intentionally overdosed. Both of the couple's children were home when their mother died. Lee's story fell apart fairly quickly when hospital staff noted, quote, bruising and apparent trauma to Christa's face, as well as, quote, injuries consistent with strangulation. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences ruled Christa's manner of death as homicide, and cause of death was compression of the neck. Lee was arrested on October 11, 2024, and he admitted that Christa was not suicidal, nor was she using drugs. Investigators found that Lee had been engaging on social media with right-wing influencers. He liked a post from men's right influencer Ciro Kasabian that read, quote, I no longer trust women in work environments. He liked multiple misinformation posts from people like Elon Musk and Kyle Reese about federal agents blocking hurricane aid efforts in North Carolina. Lee has been charged with capital murder and has been denied contact with his children. Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon, nor is it going away. Women from different backgrounds, ages, class, education levels have been murdered, and their killers have led authorities to believe that their deaths are a result of suicide. Here are just a few other examples. Katrine Mary Simpson was found hanging in her garage by her boyfriend. She had reported him for domestic violence in the past. Quickly, it was discovered that her boyfriend had actually killed her and staged the scene. 32-year-old Alexandra Penning was killed by her 45-year-old boyfriend, who was a married father of 4. He claimed that Alexandra had told him that her other boyfriend was abusive. She had been made dependent on him in her mental health and addiction struggles. The killer was a nurse practitioner and used his profession to manipulate Alexandra into staying with him. 45-year-old Claire Piernock died in what appeared to be a car accident, with her 18-year-old daughter in the car, who survived. Claire was found with a whiskey bottle in the car and cans of gas in the vehicle. When investigators determined Claire hadn't died in the car, but before she was placed in the car, they turned to her husband. He insisted Claire was, quote, sloppy drunk after an argument. Her injuries were consistent with being choked. After an argument about a bill, Claire's husband choked her, tied her up, forced a tube down her throat, and poured alcohol down the tube. 48-year-old Kendi Howard was found dead with a gunshot wound to her mouth in her home. Kendi had been planning on divorcing her controlling 58-year-old husband, who was an Idaho state trooper. The medical examiner found that Kendi had been asphyxiated before being shot, Her husband had found out that she was pursuing a divorce and would gain half of his assets. Her husband likely suffocated her with a neck restraint that police officers are trained on. He had a history of retaliatory behavior as a police officer. 39-year-old Ellie Shea was a lieutenant with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Her 49-year-old husband was a sheriff's deputy. When Ellie discovered her husband's affair, the couple argued. Her husband claimed he brought their kids to the grocery store, and when they returned, they found Ellie dead in their bed with a gun on her chest. He claimed she was depressed about his affair. He shot her and pretended to discover her body. Deborah Jane Rogers was only 23 years old when she died in 1983. Her husband claimed that she had been depressed about her job and had been having suicidal thoughts. He said she left after he grabbed her arm during an argument. After missing 2 days of work, her body was discovered in a state park with a knife sheath beside her body with her husband's name on it. A grand jury convened in 2016, and her husband was arrested over 30 years later. Writer, director, actor Adrienne Shelly was 40 when she was found hanging from a bedsheet in her Manhattan apartment-turned-office. Her husband Andy insisted that Adrienne was happy. The couple had a 2-year-old daughter, their marriage was great, and she was finding huge success with her film, Waitress. While there were no signs of a break-in, investigators eventually followed inconsistencies in the scene to find that Adrienne had been murdered and her body staged by a member of a construction crew working on the building. It took her friends and her family urging investigators to look deeper to get movement in the case. Sarah Fry's husband called 911 after allegedly finding his wife had taken her life after an argument. Sarah's father said that he had taken his grandchildren from the home that day due to the arguing. Evidence pointed to a violent struggle, and Sarah's journal revealed that she was planning on leaving the marriage. 19-year-old Jessica Boyenton, mother to 2 boys, was found with a gunshot wound to the head in her locked home. Her 20-year-old husband was a police officer. He claimed that she texted him that she was going to end her life, and then he heard 2 gunshots. The gun was found under Jessica's body, which is not consistent with a suicide. Jessica was in a coma, and when she woke, she told police her husband had tried to kill her. He was having an affair, and she wanted a divorce. Patricia Sturm was 62 years old when she was found shot in the head in 2016. Her husband, also 62, said that Patricia had sent him a suicidal text and had been suffering from seizures in the days leading up to her death. It was quickly discovered that her husband was having an affair. 31-year-old Maria Munoz and her 45-year-old husband were separated in the days before Maria's death. Maria's husband was a nurse anesthetist. In September 2020, Maria was found dead in her family's home. Her husband claimed that Maria had been, quote, super depressed and overdosed on prescription medication. A syringe and needle catheter were found beside her body. The medical examiner found a puncture mark on Maria's elbow and no pill residue in her stomach. Friends and family, and even her husband's boss, encourage investigators to do a full toxicology screening. A number of medications were found in Maria's system, all of which her husband had access to. Investigators discovered that the husband was having an affair, and Maria had discovered that they were planning to take a European vacation together. The husband didn't want Maria spending money on an attorney for the divorce. He injected her with propofol and waited to call 911 so she couldn't be resuscitated. 44-year-old Amy Allwine was found with a gunshot wound to the head in November 2016. She had no traces of gunshot residue or blood on her, but her husband did have gunshot residue on his hands. Amy also had a high amount of scopolamine in her system, which is also called, quote, the devil's drug, because it can erase memory and make a victim incapable of exercising free will. Despite this, he insisted she killed herself. Her husband was an IT specialist who worked from home. Amy had been complaining of not feeling well. Her husband claimed that the couple's son found Amy dead later that evening. Investigators learned that the husband had purchased a gun and installed a security system after Amy had gotten threatening emails encouraging her to kill herself. The husband was found to have attempted a number of times to hire a hitman to kill Amy on the dark web. When these attempts failed, he turned to the drug. In addition, Amy had a $700,000 life insurance policy, and her husband had been having an affair with a woman he met on Ashley Madison. 29-year-old mother of two, April Holt, was found dead in her bathroom with a bag over her head in 2023. Her husband claimed to have found her unresponsive in the shower. April died 2 days later after being on life support. April's mother, Jamie Dickerson, noted bruising on her daughter's neck and ankles, as well as broken blood vessels on her cheeks. April had requested a divorce from her husband just 2 weeks before her death. She had attempted to leave the marriage in the past, but had finally decided that this was it. Despite these suspicious elements, April's death was ruled a suicide. It took April's mother's tenacity to get April's case reviewed. This new investigation found that April's husband's fingerprints were the only ones found on the plastic bag and tape on April's body. In July 2024, April's husband admitted that he strangled her and tampered with evidence to make her death look like a suicide. Jennifer Corbin was 33 years old when she was found in her primary bedroom with a gun beside her and divorce papers and a bottle of wine on her nightstand. Jennifer's husband had filed for divorce and wanted the home, full custody of the couple's 2 children, and child support. The scene never felt right to investigators, who were unable to locate Jennifer's husband at first. The gunshot wound was not consistent with a self-inflicted shot. Investigators were tipped off to look at the death of a former girlfriend of Jennifer's husband named Dolly Hearn, who went to medical school with him. The 2 deaths were eerily similar, and Jennifer's death was ruled a homicide. On April 11, 2007, 50-year-old Michelle McNeil was found dead in her bathtub, with her husband claiming that she had fallen. When paramedics arrived, the bathtub had been drained, and Michelle's doctor husband was performing CPR. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. The couple had 8 children together. Michelle's husband told investigators that Michelle had been taking multiple pain medications while recovering from plastic surgery, and she must have overdosed and drowned. The couple's 24-year-old daughter, Alexis Summers, suspected her father. Michelle suspected that her husband was having an affair. In addition, he had insisted on Michelle's facelift and demanded to handle her medications. When Alexis pushed back, he banned her from the house. Michelle's husband's mistress quickly moved in after Michelle's death, posing as the children's nanny. The husband had lied about a number of things in his past, including counterfeit medical school documents and a felony on his record. After an attempt to steal one of his adopted children's identity, the husband and his mistress were arrested, and he was found guilty of murder in 2012. He died by suicide 5 years later, in 2017, after losing an appeal. Let's talk about one notorious case that isn't what it ended up appearing to be. This is the case of a woman murdering her husband. We are including this story in this video as a warning of a possible outcome of living under coercive control and systematic abuse. This is the story of Mary Winkler and the murder of her husband, Matthew. Matthew Winkler was the pulpit minister of 4th Street Christ Church in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary and Matthew met while in college in 1995. Mary has said that their dating relationship was great, and they were engaged within 3 months of dating. Mary said that their dynamic shifted drastically after about 2 or 3 months of marriage. Matthew seemed to become a different person who would yell at Mary. She said one day he would encourage her to do something, and the next he would go into a rage when she would do what she was being encouraged to do. His rage escalated, and Mary was ashamed to tell anyone. She felt that she couldn't escape his rage when he became upset. He became verbally abusive, criticizing Mary's weight, appearance, friends, how she kept their home, and how she parented their children. On March 22, 2006, church members discovered Matthew's body in his home after he missed an evening church service. Mary and the couple's 3 daughters were missing, prompting initial concern that they had been kidnapped. The morning of Matthew's death, Mary said that their 1-year-old daughter woke at 6 a.m., crying. Matthew physically kicked Mary out of the bed to deal with the baby, but he flew into a rage and stormed into the baby's room. She said the sound of the baby monitor sent him into a rage. When she caught up with him, she saw him with his hand covering the baby's mouth and nose to get her to pass out so she'd stop crying. When Mary stopped him, he told her to shut the baby up. Once she got the baby settled, Mary wanted to talk to Matthew about what just happened. The next thing she claimed to remember is the sound of the shotgun. Matthew had been discovered in the couple's bed, with a gunshot wound to the back. Mary has said that she is unable to remember many details, but she knows that Matthew asked her why, and she answered, "I'm sorry." She said that Matthew's criticisms had increased recently, and she snapped. The bedroom phone, however, had been disconnected, preventing Matthew from calling for help. Mary said that she just wanted to get Matthew's attention so he'd stop being mean and just enjoy his life. She just wanted him to be happy so they could be happy together. Matthew's public persona as a dynamic and charismatic pastor was who Mary hoped he truly was. However, she said his mask would drop at home. She worked to present them as the perfect couple, despite what was happening behind closed doors. Her focus was keeping him happy and steering clear. She said, quote, "I was worn out trying to remember everything and trying to do it as he would like it. It was just too much." She said she failed Matthew by not speaking up about her feelings. Both allegedly wanted a divorce, but neither felt that it would be allowed. Mary's van was spotted in Orange Beach, Alabama, within 24 hours of Matthew's death. In the van was the shotgun. Mary said she fled because she wanted to give the girls positive memories with her before she was arrested, and she had planned on bringing them to Matthew's parents' home before turning herself in. An Amber Alert had been issued for the girls. Mary was stoic and asked no questions when she was apprehended. She said hurting Matthew had crossed her mind in the past due to his treatment of her. She said, quote, "I love him dearly, but gosh, he could just nail me to the ground. I have nerves now, and I have self-esteem, so my ugly came out." Mary's family said that she had changed after the couple had gotten married. They said she was never happy and stopped laughing. She would get defensive when someone pointed out bruising on her body. However, Mary never disclosed any alleged abuse to anyone in her life. Matthew's alleged behavior was shocking, but not entirely surprising to some. He had threatened to shoot his neighbor's dog multiple times. Some churchgoers have since said he'd lose his temper with them. Mary said that Matthew had threatened her with the shotgun many times and even told her he'd chop her up into 1,000,000 pieces. Investigators discovered that Mary and Matthew had been involved in a lottery scam and ended up owing $16,000. The scammer would email a, quote, lottery winner with a fraudulent check for thousands of dollars. The recipient is instructed to pay taxes and fees before being able to get the fake lump sum payout. Mary cashed the counterfeit checks and began check kiting, which is writing one check to cover the check written to another bank. Mary opened a bank account and a P.O. box without Matthew knowing and attempted to remove him from a joint account. The prosecution alleged that Mary's motive for killing Matthew was to cover up this financial scheme. Mary testified that Matthew had ordered the bank deposits, and her role in the family was to write the checks he requested. She was never charged with any financial crimes. Mary's defense team represented her pro bono, and she was released on bond, moving in with friends Rudolph and Kathy Thompson. During the trial, Mary took the stand in her own defense. She said that Matthew regularly berated her and forced her to wear, quote, slutty costumes during sex. She said that she ran away after shooting Matthew because she was afraid that he would be angry and come after her. While on the stand, the defense presented a wig and a high-heeled shoe, described as a stripper shoe, to Mary, who hung her head in shame while admitting that Matthew would force her to wear them. There was an audible gasp when these items were presented. Mary said that Matthew forced her to perform sexual acts she didn't want to do, including watching pornography. Mary was ultimately convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 3 to 6 years in prison. Due to time served, Mary spent 1 more week in prison and then spent 60 days in a mental health facility. She will be on probation for the rest of her life. Matthew's parents had custody of the couple's children during Mary's trial and imprisonment. Matthew's mother repeatedly denied all claims of abuse on behalf of her son and accused Mary of turning Matthew into a monster. Matthew's parents sued to terminate Mary's parental rights and filed a wrongful death suit against Mary on behalf of her daughters. In August 2008, Mary and Matthew's parents came to an out-of-court agreement, and Mary was given custody of her children. Mary has said that she still loved Matthew and his parents, and she had apologized to his parents. She now believes she was dependent on him and didn't spend enough time in prison for the crime she had committed. Today, she lives a quiet life with her girls and has been battling an MS diagnosis. Mary is an outlier amongst these women, but her story serves as a cautionary tale for the pressure coercive control puts on the victim. Please note, in this case especially, while we always believe victims, it is difficult when a story isn't cut and dry. But based on the findings of the jury and Mary's sworn testimony, Mary's story is one of an abused woman snapping. These cases are all very different, but share a lot of similarities. We see religious abuse, age differences, men in power positions in the community, extramarital affairs, Thank you for controlling listening. behavior, Please shame. comment, Law like, enforcement and and subscribe. investigators must be You can willing also to ask
check out our
questions about a
podcast,
death
Fixate
that appears to
Today,
be
Gone
self-inflicted,
Tomorrow, for
and not
more
accept
content.
the easy
Have
answer.
anything you'd like us to
If
fixate
more
on?
questions had
Reach
been
out and
asked
let us
when
know.
Mica's body
Thanks
was
for
found,
joining us.
we would not be pushing so hard now for accountability
Disclaimer.
and information.
We are not investigators, journalists, detectives, law enforcement, or historians. We are 2 neurodivergent ladies who just hyperfixate. Please do not take our opinions and ideas as statements of fact. All allegations are just that. We are not accusing anyone of anything, simply offering our interpretation of what we've researched.